Hello! Before we get started, some content warnings for child abuse, molestation, queerphobia, pedophilia, outdated terminology, the AIDS epidemic, rejection, and suicide.
Fun.
So I got started thinking about this topic because I'd received a lot of hate comments on my Pride video about how I was sexualizing children or was a pedophile and things like that. And that made me think about how society treats children and how maybe we should pause here for title card. We need to liberate the children.
Yep, agreed.
So, the children's liberation movement was actually spun off from the gay rights movement because obviously one of the main things that was used against gays and lesbians and trans people were that they couldn't reproduce biologically or fit into the traditional family structure.
Yeah.
And that makes you think, how necessary is that family structure?
The nuclear family is a plague upon society.
The Boston Gays Men Liberation Group released a 10-point list in 1972, and point 6 on that list called for the liberation of children. It says, rearing children should be the common responsibility of the whole community. Any legal rights parents have over their children should be dissolved, and each child should be free to choose its own destiny. Free 24-hour child care centers should be established where gays and lesbians can share the responsibility of child rearing.
Yeah, communal child rearing in general would probably be the best for cutting down instances of abuse, which tend to require a sort of very isolated, insular, hierarchical structure in order to be perpetuated, at least in our society.
I mean, the whole idea of childhood is like very, very new idea from like maybe only like the 1900s.
Yeah.
But I think what was the most surprising thing was that the child liberation movement was actually kind of a mainstream idea, at least amongst a lot of leftist societies. Because there were a lot of different works done by people writing about children, and maybe we should treat children as people.
Yeah, I guess a lot of and civil rights movements were very interrelated. Like, you know, women's rights, gay rights, like civil rights for any non-white person. Like,
right, they were all happening at the same time. We just
yeah.
get taught as if they're
like
separate
unrelated
things, but they all fed into each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like, one example of a book that was published about children and how we should liberate them was I'm gonna have trouble pronouncing this. Growing Up Absurd by Paul Goodman from the 1960s. He was hired to do a study and write on about male youth delinquency, which he did, but he didn't come to the conclusion that his publisher wanted him to come to.
What conclusion was that exactly?
That juvenile delinquency was a result of capitalism not providing youth with meaningful work, an honorable community, sexual freedom, or any spiritual sustenance. And that the youths who were juvenile delinquents were right to rebel. And maybe we should all rebel. And it kind of started to form the groundworks for the children's liberation movement because it described child paternalism, which is the idea that you're a child, you must be protected, therefore you give up almost all your rights to be in the protection of adults.
Yeah, you're basically owned by your parents until you're like 18. So, yeah.
Yes.
Makes sense.
And Paul Goodman saw this as a result of capitalism, because you need to provide a profitable outcome. So you have your child, you need to make them into an adult that can...
Into an upstanding, functional member of society.
Yes, that could make a profit when they go into work. And in that way, that means when you're raising your children, you're raising them for a life of nothingness. No meaningful work, because you're probably just going to get busy jobs in, like, retail. Or, host services. Or you're going to go and work in an office. And none of these jobs are very fulfilling.
I guess, what is it, preparing, it's, what is that term I'm thinking of?
I don't know.
Isolating people from the fruits of their labor.
Hold on, we're gonna go all Marxist here.
I wish.
But, yes.
Yeah.
Because let's say you have a child, you must raise them so that they can support themselves as an adult. So, and the only jobs available are like office jobs and inventory.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how are you going to feel meaningful or fulfilled?
Yeah, admittedly, it is very difficult to feel fulfilled in most jobs. Like, and even ones that are fulfilling, it's like there's still the everyday stressors of the job, so like, yeah, there's just a lot that goes into work and preparing kids for that.
Right. And youths who are prepared for that life are right to rebel, according to Paul Goodman, because that's not life. No meaningful work, no honorable community, no freedom, no spiritual sustenance.
Yeah, isn't the main contributor to, like, a lot of mental health issues, like a sort of lack of control over your life and environment?
Yeah, that's especially, like, one of the main contributors for disabled adults.
Oh, yeah, that's fun.
Often because... and I can back this up, we feel like we have no control, so we feel like we're children.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's accurate, especially with the system set up so that you literally couldn't live alone. Like, yeah, and, like, children just really have no control over anything, really.
Which, speaking of...
like, none.
Having control... A.S. Neal ran Summerhill, which was a boarding school, and he had a very interesting way of setting up the way his school worked. And he published, I think it was like 4 papers that got compiled into the book Summerhill, A Radical Approach to Child Rearing, in which he laid out how to raise children who were happy and felt fulfilled.
I'm pretty sure society is not designed to make people happy or fulfilled.
That's true. And his main thing was that children needed democracy, non-compulsory activities, self-regulation, personal responsibility, freedom from fear, freedom in sex play, loving, understanding, and the right to play. Now, I just want to clear up, because children's sexual freedom is going to be mentioned a lot. And the way that it was used, it was more referring to what we would now see as sexual orientation and allowing children to explore, attractions outside the norm
Basically,
with people their own age. It would please do not take the ideas from the children's liberation movement and try and justify pedophilia, because most of the children's liberation movement was started as a way for gay men and other LGBTQ community to show that they are not pedophiles.
Yeah.
So taking this completely out of
Pedophilia
context
isn't a sexual orientation, and it's not excusable.
Though people who do suffer from pedophilic urges should seek treatment.
Seek mental treatment,
and we should not,
Yeah, and
demonize them.
especially when they are seeking treatment. Yeah. Like,
Anyway.
I guess just mainly comprehensive sex education is good for everyone because it allows you to, like, understand yourself and, like, understand your body and, yeah. Like, when I assumed I was straight, it was just sort of very weird to, like, just not be straight, but, like, oh, I've never been attracted to anyone, so, like, I'm assuming that I am only waiting for the right guy. Can you imagine?
I'm just a very godly woman who can resist temptation.
What can I say? I'm very good at resisting sexual urges. Yeah.
Right. So, A.S. Neal's school, Summerhill, worked as a total democracy. The children could decide their curriculum, they could write their behavior code, they could decide their schedule, they could decide if they wanted to do homework or go to class.
Okay.
And what he was able to show was that children are able to be motivated without coercion.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's also interesting because I'm assuming that, I mean, you mentioned that it led to kids being generally happier and more fulfilled, but, like, it would also teach kids self-regulation, which tends not to be taught to kids.
Because
like, if you're just shuttled from one class to the next, and then, like, assigned a ton of homework, and then whatever, and, like, now all our most free time is just sort of left to the whatever thing you want to look up on the internet, that's not really conducive to, like, being able to function as an adult.
Right, you're kind of left in this environment where your every movement is controlled through public school and through town curfews and through your parents or your guardians or whoever's raising you. And then you turn 18 and it's like, okay, go figure everything out now.
Like, before, all your time was just very strictly regulated by people outside of yourself, and any free time you had was just spent with, like, aimless wandering on the internet, or, like, around town or whatever. But, like, and then you turn 18 and it's like, oh, wow, and you're not in school, and it's like, oh, wow, I have so much time for aimless wandering.
Yeah. So, Neal's main point of his papers was to prove that children can function as democratic actors and make sensible social and sexual choices. And that was a big building block for the idea that maybe we should emancipate children.
Yeah, children can be recognized to be people, and, like, obviously no one should be left entirely to their own devices, not even adults, but, like, should be given freedom in their life.
Right, and then the next work of literature that was very important to the movement was Children's Liberation by David Gottlieb from 1973. And he demonstrated that the way we treat children actively victimizes children. Like, the way we have our school set up traumatizes kids. It forms an authoritarian lifestyle where they have no control of their lives, higher risk of depression, anxiety, PTSD, and they have no recourse if they are suffering from child abuse.
Yeah, I mean, I know in more modern times, at least, there are now at least policies in place that allow schools and, like, educators to, like, note, like, if they notice signs of child abuse, they can, like, at least report it. But, like, there needs to be a better system because
Well, like you were saying, the isolated nuclear family leaves people isolated.
Yeah, it's very good at it can hide many evils, like, honestly. Yeah.
The next one was the children's rights movement, Overcoming the Oppression of Young People by Beatrice and Ronald Gross from 1975, and it argued that children have inherent rights just like adults, and that in our reorganizing of society is we need to figure out a way to balance parental rights versus children's rights with interference from outside authority. So like you were saying in the case of child abuse.
Yeah.
What right does the government then have to step in? And that's the discussion we're having now with everything surrounding whether or not trans kids are allowed to receive gender-affirming care or to socially transition. Like, there was one case where the dad wanted to get the authorities involved because the mom
was supportive.
Yeah, was supportive of their trans daughter.
Oh,
and the dad was like, "This is child abuse."
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something we're still trying to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, there's intersections between the gay rights liberation movement and the women's liberation movement with the child's liberation movement.
Right, where it was seen that with more communal child rearing, then women would be more able to be out in the workforce if they so chose to. It would no longer, females' reproductive ability would not hinder them in that way.
Exactly. Because
unless they chose to be hindered, I guess.
Yeah, unless they were specifically, like, choosing to want to raise a child. And this way, men and women would have, like, equal treatment. Well, males and females, or those assigned male at birth and those assigned female at birth, would have equal treatment, because then childhood and saying, like, well, the women need to take care of the family, that wouldn't be an issue, because then there would be collective child rearing, and everyone would lend a hand.
Instead of just the usual collective child rearing, where any older siblings are then forced to take care of any younger siblings, and there's really a combination of no choice and very little freedom involved in said matter, and also, like, a lot of stress and responsibility.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, older siblings shouldn't have to co-parent their younger siblings, and, yeah.
They should not. So, Carl Whitman, in 1969, published the Gay Manifesto. And in it, he made the point that kids are already taking care of themselves.
Like in which...
Specifically gay kids.
Okay.
In that they've been forced to repress who they are, and they have to hide who they are. And this, of course, leads to higher rates of suicide, depression, and all of that. And figuring out who they are on their own without being able to seek help from anyone. And he argues that this, denying them knowledge and forcing them to repress themselves, is far more dangerous than them actually having sex with other gay people.
Yeah, I guess I can see how that would happen. I mean, of course, there's been the more recent, like, movements to bring awareness of mental health issues and, like, help people out with that. And, like, you wouldn't really see many people defending these days, like, oh no, actually we shouldn't talk about mental health at all. We should force everyone back into the metaphorical closet if they have mental health issues. And that is kind of what happens with any queer children if they don't have anyone around who they can actually talk to and trust.
Yeah, and it's a very lonely experience. You feel like you can't trust anyone, and you're really all out there on your own, and anyone could be dangerous to turn to for help. It's just not good, and it completely wrecks your mental health.
Yeah.
But this brings us to one of the big factors, and what all the hate comments in the beginning had me thinking about. Gay kids exist. Lesbian kids exist. Trans kids exist. Bisexual kids exist. Pansexual kids exist. Aro-ace kids exist. Whatever your lovely gender, sexuality, there are children out there who are that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I think, like, the one point that I thought might have driven people to say you were supporting pedophilia or whatever, besides that knee-jerk reactionary response to, like, fearmonger because of homophobia, besides that, was that you mentioned having, like, a crush on a fellow student, and it's like, you were both fellow students?
Yeah.
You were, like, the same age?
Yeah.
It's generally normal for that to happen, right? I assume. I've been told.
It is very normal for that to happen.
Like, and I don't get, like, this sort of weird... Well, I mean, I do understand where it's coming from. It's the homophobia. But, like, why do people police queer children's romantic desires more than straight children's romantic desires?
Well, straight children's romantic desires is seen as normal or adorable or like cute puppy love, but queer desires is automatically seen as sexual.
Yep. And that's not right.
Yeah. So from, like, the late 1960s to early 1970s, the gay rights movement was pushing this message that gay kids exist and that we should support gay children. And hey, maybe the nuclear family isn't that great?
Yeah, like...
Because the current family model suppresses and abuses LGBTQ plus youth.
Like, we don't need, like, the faux traditional nuclear family, which only is a few generations old, really, to, like, replace what was at least there in many cultures, which is more communal, even if it was just the immediate family communal, but more communal child rearing.
Multi-generational type households.
Yeah, like, sometimes I wonder, like, in our case, our dearest father was abusive, and, like, and one of the things that, like, really helped hide that was the fact that we were in, like, a nuclear family type thing.
Out in the suburbs.
Out in the suburbs. We moved, to a different state, away from extended family, which might have been of some assistance in, like, helping protect us in general. So, like, yeah, the nuclear family hides many ills. Like, really. Even if you do have, like, good parents and, like, good families out there, that never will really justify all this shit that can happen to people in general.
Yeah. So, with the problems with the nuclear family, the gay liberation movement and the children's liberation movement, it's all an easy solution. Just eliminate the nuclear family and have multi-generational households. And it would be like, okay, so what was the blueprint which they saw for this? And one of the things that a lot of the activists spoke about is that queer adults have already been raising queer children. Because, well, 40% of all homeless youth are queer.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you get kicked out, you're on the street, so you go to the gay neighborhood, some queer adults take you in and give you a place to live. So there was a huge movement to house queer youth. And Marcia Pay Them No Mind Johnson and Sylvia Rivera formed the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, which set up youth shelters for trans youth. And the gay chosen family was just a normal, mundane thing that happened. So you would have your mom or your dad in your new chosen family, and you would have all your relatives, and it was just as powerful, as an impactful as your biological relatives.
Yeah, usually more so because, I mean, usually queer youth were homeless for a reason. Most homeless people are homeless for a reason.
Yeah, and we should maybe give every homeless person a home. But that's a conversation for another video.
Yeah.
I just want to take one moment to highlight this one group, Revolutionary Feminists, which were gay men who placed themselves in the service of women, taking on household tasks such as child rearing, so that women can rise to power. And
direct action.
Yeah, exactly. And there was the Men's Child Care Collective. It was a GSA, that's Gay Straight Alliance, that helped to take care of children. And they ran a daycare for AA meetings and political conference for POC women. And these gay daycares formed all over the country in order to support different activists in different movements, in the women's liberation, in the black rights power movement. The whole point was just to support who they can so that, you know, they can work for people's freedoms. And it had a double purpose of demonstrating that men can also be nurturers, which, you know, it's the 70s, they're still dealing with that stupid idea, the, like, woman's role, men's role.
God. And
it also demonstrated that gay men were not child molesters. Of course, this whole movement kind of hit a wall when the moral majority rose to power with Ronald Reagan and the conservative movement.
God.
And
of course it did.
They kind of pivoted to focus on saving the children. So all of a sudden there was like a lot of movement about how you need to save kids from queer people.
Do think of the children. That's so important, to think of the children.
And this was happening at the same time as the AIDS epidemic, which was seen by the moral majority and a lot of people as a sort of punishment for, like, unnatural sexual relations, or, like, you know, sinful, like, this is God's punishment on the gay populace. Like, it was that sort of idea.
Yeah.
So a lot of gay activists were just dying, or were too busy focused on surviving an epidemic that killed so many people. So they kind of had to pivot. They couldn't focus on children's liberation because the moral majority was gaining steam, and there were a lot of, like, harsher penalties enacted for queer adults interacting with children.
Yeah, didn't they pivot to trying to basically, instead of abolishing the nuclear family, instead trying to like fit in with it and being like, we too can assimilate
Yes.
into the nuclear family?
We can do the nuclear family thing too.
Oh, fun. Yeah, like the couple, 2 kids, and a dog or something.
Yeah, it forced queer people to shift gears and become respectable heterosexual substitutes. And it really changed the gay movement because then they couldn't so much focus on liberation as they were more focusing on appearing respectable.
On an interesting tangent, I remember hearing...
One side note about that gay movement trying to appear more respectable. That was mainly for the white non-POC portion of the movement.
The people who could be respectable.
They basically hung out their POC black allies and indigenous allies out to dry.
And trans allies a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the pivot... I remember reading in an article that the pivot to focusing on gay marriage by the majority of the, like, gay rights organizations sort of left it open for TERFs to, like, sneak in their ideology more because they weren't... Because since the rest of the gay rights movement wasn't focusing on educating about all these different issues as much, it was easier for TERFs to be like, I don't know, men are the root of all evil or something, and patriarchy is truly the root of all evil.
That makes sense.
The only thing that's wrong with society.
Because the main focus of the children's liberation movement was to give children adequate education in LGBTQ issues and like have them learn and understand who they are. But if you have a huge portion of them being forced to step away because the AIDS epidemic and the backlash from the moral majority, then you're like, well, who's educating the children?
Yeah. The radical feminists.
Bleh.
Yep.
And this sort of discussion really continues today. I mean, even more so. Like 15% of Gen Z are LGBTQ+. That's 1 in 6 Gen Zers you meet.
Mm-hmm.
And more kids are coming out, so now there's more of a fight to educate children about sexual orientations and gender identities and romantic orientation.
Yeah, and obviously the conservative right are being all very reactionary and sort of stepping up their Think of the Children campaigns.
Right, especially with all the attacks that they're making on trans kids now.
Yeah.
Like, it's horrible.
Like, you wouldn't want to force a cis female person to, like, compete against, like, also...
I mean, even with just how
student.
invasive checking for a child's sex is, like, like, that is its own form of abuse.
It's interesting how a lot of conservative, right-wingers will be like, oh yeah, think of the children, but they never really care about the children. Like, if they would, they wouldn't be supporting such an abusive system that allows abuse to be hidden and perpetuated in darkness. And they wouldn't do things like enforce ridiculous curfews and remove, kids from, like, parks using, like, those mosquito...
Oh, yeah.
...things.
Yeah, that loud noise.
That younger people can hear because it's, like, so high-pitched and that drives them out of public spaces. And they wouldn't be focused on defunding libraries and, and having like, sort of inherently traumatic education systems. And they'd focus on, like, having sex ed because that helps people, like, learn who they are and know what they're comfortable with. And, like, yeah.
I mean, right now, Arkansas, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Missouri, Montana, New Hampshire, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and Utah are all considering or have banned trans-affirming care for children.
Which just helps trans kids survive into adulthood.
Yeah. So if you're a parent and your child comes out as trans to you and you're like, okay, yeah, you want to change your pronouns, change your name, dress a different way, you can now, that's illegal, or might become illegal in these states. They're still debating because obviously there's quite a lot to debate about this.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that such matters are so open to debate. I just love how people's very selves and beings are just another subject for intellectual discourse in, public settings.
Not to mention, America has a child abuse, problem. 1 in 7 children will be abused, and the child abuse hotline receives 6.6 million reports a year, and that's only what's reported, so it could actually be higher.
That's disturbing.
Yes.
And then considering how a lot of physical discipline isn't even considered abuse, despite more recent, very highly researched studies showing that it does have a negative impact on children.
Physical discipline has the same effect on children as physical abuse does mentally. It causes higher rates of aggression, more problem and danger-seeking behavior, higher rates of depression, PTSD, anxiety, just so many problems.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, you don't want to hear that, but if you're spanked as a child, you're abused. If you spank your child, you are abusing your child.
Yep. And, that doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad person.
It just means you grew up
in a society. It just happens.
Yeah, it just means you grew up in a society where we're taught that this is normal, and now that more research is being done into it, we're seeing the negative effects, and that, hey, maybe we should stop spanking children.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Let's see, what else do I have? Oh yeah, trans children know who they are. There was a recent study that was done. It took trans kids or children in general at a very young age, asked them how they identified, and then checked in with them years down the line and kept checking in with them to see if they continue to identify in that way. And every child that identified as a gender that they were not assigned at birth continued to identify as a gender they were not assigned at birth throughout the period. And cis children identified with the same gender that they wound up with at the end too. So there's a consistency. Trans children feel and identify with their gender just as much as cisgender people, and it didn't matter when they transitioned. Some children did not socially transition and still continued to identify with the gender they were not assigned at birth. Some children did it very early on and still continued to identify with the gender they were not assigned at birth.
Nice.
Yes. So, just absolute proof that trans identity and cisgender identity are on the same level.
Yep.
And denying transition is abuse. It leads to suicide, depression, and self-hatred, and just some really dark places. As someone who went through that, it is not good.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you were talking about the education system, autistic children, ADHD children, neurodivergent children, and disabled children are 3 times more likely to receive abuse, and that is because they have trouble communicating their wants and needs. And they have even less control over their lives than neurotypical children.
Yeah.
And they can receive neglect at home, abuse from trusted adults, and bullying. So our whole system just traumatizes them from birth.
Like, if you care about children, you should be focused on these issues more than that knee-jerk homophobic response that anything related to queerness is automatically pedophilia, or pedophilia related, or a gateway drug to pedophilia.
There just needs to be a better way to raise kids, one that gives them a safe place to explore themselves and make their own decisions. And here's some changes I think would work really well. I guess we'll go one by one.
Yeah.
Universal basic income.
Yeah, I mean, that would help adults at least.
Yes, it would help adults care for children, but it would also allow children a freedom to, like, remove themselves from situations,
Yeah.
which could be dangerous.
Also, that would do a lot to, like, you know, like, even out, disparate, like, classes. You know, like, being lower class versus upper class. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Like, there's just really something about...
But, like, even children who are upper class, they have as much control over their lives as children who are lower class.
Yeah.
Which is almost none.
Mm-hmm.
Unless...
Still, it's interesting being, like, growing up in as, like, with a lower income family, and, like, just that, all that financial anxiety that it places.
Yes. Oh, we didn't even get a chance to talk about that yet.
Yeah, like... Oh, that'll have to be another video.
Yeah, well, there was a study that showed that children feel the financial anxiety of their situation just as much as the adults do. So, like, if your parents are anxious about money, you're going to feel that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And, like, you might not understand it as a child. Like, why am I feeling so anxious all the time about buying a lollipop?
Yeah, just that hyper-awareness of, like, how much things cost.
It's called, weathering. It's the effect of that hyper-awareness from economic anxieties has on poor people, and it causes them to age quicker.
So, literally, being poor kills you.
It does. Yeah, you're living this life, and everything becomes, like, you have to concentrate. Like, even when you're a kid, like, you think, okay, my family's struggling, maybe I don't ask for the new shoes. Maybe we go to Goodwill and get the shoes. But those are things that you now have to pay attention to every day. And throughout your entire life, there's all these little negotiations you have to make. And over time, you have to make these same negotiations if you're still poor, as a teenager, then a young adult, and then a middle-aged adult, and then an older adult, and it has a continuing effect. Cumulative effect on your body that basically kills you slowly.
Oh, is that why I have a panic attack every time I pay the bills?
Yes.
Weird. I thought that was just what adults did.
Nope. Okay, so universal basic income might help to negate some of that.
Yeah.
Community child rearing. We already talked about how useful this is.
Just having a bunch of trusted adults, and if any adult asks you to keep a secret about yourself from other people, just say no. Just tell everyone.
Or stab the adult.
That'll save a lot of time, actually.
Carry around little knives. Okay, access to LGBTQ education.
And sex ed.
And
which,
yeah, I think
I guess
that's
sex ed includes, yeah, that education.
Because children and teenagers are already deciding to become sexually active at a young age. So the worst thing we could do is preach abstinence only and then make them feel terrible about themselves and not be prepared to deal with, like, irregular periods or pregnancy and just, like, a whole bunch of issues. I mean, even outside of sex ed, we need to teach females and other people who experience periods
just
what a period should be like.
More resources available to them.
Right, because of our lackluster education system on female menstruation, when people have irregular periods or suffer from dysmenorrhea or endometriosis or anything like that, they don't know that there's something wrong with them. So, low-income females tend not to go to a doctor when they should, and that can cause problems to build and build and build and build over time and become worse.
Yeah.
It's not good. So we need better sex ed, so people can know when there's something wrong with them.
And it shouldn't be separated by, like, sex, because I think, like, just a bit of knowledge
would benefit
about
from
the human
it.
body is just a good thing to have.
Yeah, like, males also need to learn about the female anatomy.
It's like, can you imagine
well.
taking an anatomy class and they're like, oh, if you're AFAB, then you probably shouldn't learn anything about the male reproductive system. It's like, okay, but what are you saying? Like,
it's just good because it also creates that empathy, because you have cases where some males don't know anything and they're like so confused when they first encounter and learn about a period. So everyone should know. Also, access to healthcare, food, shelter, and affirmation.
Yeah, I mean, healthcare, food, and shelter is just a basic human right.
It is just a basic human right, but we can't even get that right because we have such a high population of children and youth who are on the street. So we need to get that right.
Yeah.
Also, children should be allowed democracy in schedule, rules, play, and location. That means they should be able to decide their schedule. They should be able to decide what rules they live by, how they want to play, and where they want to be.
Yep. Definitely. Like,
I don't know, maybe we could do what A.S. Neal did at Summerhill and have, like, a children government in the school.
I mean, isn't that what student government is?
Deciding the curriculum and everything. Yeah, but our current system for student government is you don't really have any control.
Yeah, they don't really...
Like, you might be able to decide we're going to have a bake sale in this field trip, but you have no control over anything else.
Which doesn't exactly create civic-mindedness in children.
Me, yeah. It's basically a puppet government for the adults.
It's, yeah, it's very dystopian when you think about it.
It really is. It really is.
Yeah, is that everything on your list?
That is everything on my list. Do you have anything to add?
Do I have anything to add? No, I think that covers it. Conservatives don't really care about children. They just want to, like, glorify some imagined past when everyone respected their elders and, no one swore, and, I don't know, men were real men, women were real women, and small furry creatures from Alpha Centauri were real small furry creatures from Alpha Centauri.
Ooh, nice reference.
Thank you.
Well, I was stuck in bed. You were stuck here with me, but now you may go and live your lives. Go, be cute, keep gay, be crime. Bye!
So I'm free to go now? I'm free to leave?
No!